Greetings all, my name is Alan Dyer and I'd like to welcome you to our webinar on greenwashing, how to manage the risk and avoid staining your brand. I'd like to acknowledge that I'm connecting in from the lands of the Bejigal people of the Eora Nation in modern day Sydney and pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging. Firstly, before we jump into the session, I just wanted to cover off a few housekeeping points and briefly introduce ERM. So a couple of things. We really want to make this a really practical session, something that's relevant for you and helps answer some of your questions and really go into some of the how in terms of managing greenwashing risk. So we do encourage active participation. Please post questions along the way and we'll pick out some when we get into the QA portion of our session. We are recording this session as well, so just wanted to acknowledge that. If you don't want to be on screen, make sure you keep your cameras off during the event. However, feel free to come off camera if you would like to verbally ask a question. We are live transcribing as well. The video will be made available on our YouTube channel, ERM APAC, and will be sent to those that can't make it here today. We always love to improve our sessions, make sure that they're as practical and relevant for you. So we're always open to feedback on all of our sessions. In terms of who we are, a little bit of background on ERM. We're founded in 1971 and the largest advisory firm in the world that solely focuses on sustainability, offering a breadth and depth of expertise across a range of sustainability aspects. In terms of our core purpose is around shaping a sustainable future with the world's leading organizations. And we're recognized by many accreditations around our market leading position around delivering sustainability services. Over 8,000 professionals, around over 150 plus offices, and we're partnering with the world's largest organizations. With me today, delighted to have some great speakers with us today. So as we discuss greenwashing, we are going to explore the following questions along the way. I guess, and this was included in the invitation. How do we balance company objectives with stakeholder expectations to determine what we would publicly claim? How do we operationalize our activities internally to ensure alignment externally with what we say? And how do we remain credible and authentic when making public-facing claims? So myself, I'm an ERM partner based in Sydney, primarily focusing on in developing their corporate responsibility and sustainability strategies, undertake materiality assessments and manage their sustainability related risks, and consider ESG factors in financing and investments. My experience is over 25 years across industry and professional services and a number of in-house related roles. I'm also a lead certified sustainability assurance practitioner under the AA1000 assurance standards. Charlie, who'll be providing us with some space, is an ERM partner based in Sydney. Welcome, Charlie, who works with corporate and government clients in the areas of climate change and energy. His focus is on helping to find and implement solutions that are economically and sensible and environmentally robust. In the climate change space specifically, his expertise lies in greenhouse gas measurement, management, reporting and auditing, and works with corporate clients to develop carbon footprints and set science-based targets, develop strategies for meeting those targets. And he also works with governments to develop their net zero emissions strategies and to advise on climate-related policies and programs. Charlie's also a registered greenhouse and energy auditor with Australia's Clean Energy Regulator. Susie Giles, who will share some EU-specific perspectives with us today. And thank you for dialing in early morning for you. Susie is an ESG communications specialist with more than 20 years of experience in corporate comms and marketing. She leads our ESG communications team who work with organizations globally to communicate their sustainability strategy, write sustainability reports, and develop their sustainability brand narratives. This also includes expertise in safeguarding reputation and managing issues and crises that may arise in the ESG sustainability space. Her team works with a variety of sectors on their ESG communications, including energy, finance, banking, and retail. Susie is also a member of the European Association of Communications Directors, so look forward to hearing Susie's perspectives. And Anson Chan from RIA will provide some investment sector perspectives. Anson is a certified chartered financial analyst and is a senior responsible investment analyst at RIA. He leads the implementation of the responsible investment standard and guidance notes through assessments of financial products, quite a relevant and important aspect to today's discussion. In addition to conducting those assessments, Anson has coverage over ensuring that guidance notes stay refined, up to date, and fit for purpose through his engagement with RIA members. Prior to joining RIA, Anson was an experienced equity research analyst focusing on emerging markets and has published equity research as well as ESG thematic reports. So welcome to all of our speakers. I'll make a start by setting the scene, and then we'll in turn pass over to each of our speakers before we then open up to Q&A. So a bit of an overview. Let's dive into greenwashing, a term that many of us have come across. There is a growing vocabulary it's useful to be aware of. According to Client Earth, they refer to greenwashing in two ways. They talk about advertising and public messaging that appears more climate friendly or environmentally sustainable than it really is. They also refer to it as a technique to use to distract stakeholders from the fact that their business model and activities actually do a lot of environments, but do actually impact the environment in a harmful way. Now, there's a link there in terms of the report. There's these various terms that then connect into the whole greenwashing space, and they do define each of the terms in a bit more detail. The one that is really interesting has come up of late is green hushing, the act of management teams underreporting or hiding sustainability credentials in order to evade stakeholder scrutiny. That's a concerning outcome, especially when the change, particularly when it comes to things like reducing our greenhouse gas emissions, really needs to accelerate across the business landscape. And it's always worthwhile staying across. There's a range of vocabulary that keeps cropping up and being developed by other stakeholders. So woke washing, rainbow washing, blue washing are other terms that I've come across in my travels. If we look at greenwashing as a risk, a definition that's useful here comes from a recent Harvard article. It really go and let you read through the risk definition there, but really at its core, greenwashing is about that misrepresentation, misstatement, or false or misleading practices in relation to sustainability credentials. And it carries with it reputational, regulatory, and litigation risks for which companies should be prepared and managing against. There's no harmonized legal definition, and it does vary across regions. That's part of the challenge. I'll talk a little bit about what we're seeing. Another dimension to this is, I think, the different aspects of greenwashing that can occur. I think that's, I guess it's rooted in the fact that there's a lot of systemic change that needs to occur when it comes to sustainable outcomes that we're all looking to strive towards. So greenwashing can actually manifest in a number of contexts. So I just wanted to describe a few of them here. First is that broader brand greenwashing. So this may relate to the overall greenwashing of an organization's profile, activities, and or ambitions. It might be product level greenwashing, which relates to mislabeling or misselling of products or services. Greenwashed financing is another one there, where financing products may be promoted as green, maybe greenwashed when they may be underpinned by assets that aren't necessarily green. And then there's also the greenwashing related to corporate and financial reporting, where there may be false or misleading statements made in relation to disclosures by entities themselves. So one way to address these is by providing clear and enforceable standards to encourage organisations to implement them. There are a raft of new standards that continue to be evolved and developed, and they're being introduced at an international scale, regional scale, and at domestic levels. And these are important kind of contributions, because they allow stakeholders, analysts, investors, and civil society groups to compare either climate or other sustainability credentials across the companies that they're monitoring or invested in. So who's monitoring and enforcing? I did a little bit of research to see here, and I won't read through all of this, but looking at the landscape of different regions and countries that are starting to pay attention to greenwashing, you can see a mixture of regulators And that reflects what I've just described. You see a mixture of regulators from the advertising consumer-focused types of regulators through to the monetary authorities and security commissions, focusing more on the kind of financial side of things. So that product through to capital allocation. So I won't read through the detail here, and feel free to cast your eyes over this list, but you can see a mixture here of both the product level and that financial market integrity perspective. So this is playing out in Australia as well. Coming into what's happening in Australia, we've got this heightened scrutiny from Australian regulators. So we've got the ACCC, where sustainability and environmental claims have been a priority focus for quite some time. And recently as June, the ACCC Deputy Chairwoman Katrina Lowe said that the most common cause of concern was overreach. And what she meant by that was companies and their brands are effectively doing 5%, but claiming 95% of what they're doing when it comes to environmental claims. So that's quite a concerning quote there. The ACCC conducted recently an economy-wide internet sweep looking at environmental claims on websites and other public-facing materials, and identified that there were, out of the 247 companies that they assessed, 57% of those had concerning claims from ACCC's perspective, and had been issued with substantiation notices. So really putting those companies on notice. You'll see on the slide on the bottom left there the sectors with the greatest proportion of concerning claims that they found. It's really interesting or it's important to stay on top of this, because depending on the nature of the breach, penalties can be quite significant. And looking at some of the local legislation for consumer and competition law, it can be the greater of $50 million, Australian $50 million per incident, or 3 times the benefit received by the company in relation to the product or service that was misleadingly promoted, or 30% of annual turnover. So we're not talking about small figures here. ASIC, and ASIC really focuses on the sustainable finance side and really the integrity of the movement of financial capital around towards sustainable and responsible investment activity. And it did announce yesterday that sustainable finance is including greenwashing, will continue as one of its top 3 enforcement priorities through 2024. In her opening remarks at the ASIC annual forum yesterday, the Deputy Chair, Sarah Court, stated that in the coming year, the Commission will focus on statements and targets made without reasonable basis, as well as the use of inaccurate labelling or vague terms in sustainability-related funds. So yeah, hopefully we might get some perspectives from Anson in relation to investment products. I think the other point to keep in mind is what we're also hearing from ASIC is that they're looking to avoid the situation where consumers are paying a green premium for investing in funds that don't meet sustainability or ESG standards. So for them, they see their role as being imperative to maintaining market integrity and attracting the capital in the right spaces. The ACCC, let's have a look, get into a little bit of the how. And we've got good material that both ACCC and ASIC have put out. So ACCC have put out their 8 principles. I won't go through each of these, so feel free to read through these yourselves. But the 3 I wanted to highlight are principle 1, a basic principle of making accurate and truthful claims. Consider the overall impression that you're creating. And that includes thinking about what visual elements you're including that might be connected with or associated with the claim. So that's an important aspect to consider. The other aspect is to not exaggerate the benefits or the level of scientific acceptance that might be behind a particular claim. Principle 3 is another important one that I wanted to highlight. That's around giving the whole picture. It's important not to deliberately hide aspects of the claim that you're making. So really try to give that full picture. And principle 8 was another one. Be open and direct. I think it's understood by many stakeholders that we are on a change journey in terms of particular sustainability development, positive outcomes that we're working towards, and that we need to be clear about what our action plans are today and how they're based on the information we have today, but also outlining how we might achieve them. So no one's expecting it ought to be sorted out today, but that over time, with clear actions and transparency around how you'll get there, that should be communicated as part of your overall product and organizational claims. Looking at a particular case study, Volkswagen, quite a number of us are aware of the Volkswagen case. So I think that really highlights principle one at its worst form, I'd say. And while the claim was in relation to an environmental feature of a product, so absolutely a greenwashing incident. Those of us that are involved in ESG management and looking at ESG risks from an investor perspective, many of us would consider this a governance risk, because it really highlighted where there were cultural and governance deficiencies in how Volkswagen put itself in a position where these types of claims and in fact product design decisions were being deliberately made and communicated externally. So I think it just highlights the importance of having the appropriate controls in place. There was quite a significant fine in Australian dollars. It was over 125 million, but I'm not sure if anyone could hazard a guess at the global costs, but they are quite significant, greater than 45 billion globally in terms of the outlay. So certainly not small numbers here in terms of greenwashing risk. ASIC also has quite detailed guidance, and it's available on their website. The three that I wanted to highlight here were the top three. So firstly, is the product true to label? So we're kind of seeing some commonalities with ACCC's recommendations. But true to label, is the product's label aligning with the underlying strategy of the corporate or strategy of the investment product? So really making sure that you've got clear alignment in terms of the label. Also thinking about, have you used vague terminology? Do you need to quite clearly define particular terms? So terms like socially responsible, ethical investing, impact investing are quite commonly used in the responsible investing, sustainable investing landscape. So, but they can mean different things to different people. So being aware of that, being aware of where you may need to explain such terminology differences in how you disclose information about your product. And then your headline claims, thinking about that they shouldn't be misleading in and of themselves. So really being clear on what those headline claims are, and how you might qualify those, how you might back those up. So they're the three that jump out to me. I won't spend too much time on this, but just to speaking to the point around definitions, there have been, and this speaks to the role that other stakeholders in the sustainability landscape can play. So just wanted to share this as an example of a contribution that really helps strengthen all the controls around greenwashing risk. This was a definition of in responsible investment and sustainable investment terms that was recently published by the CFA Institute, the GSIA and the PRI, who have agreed set definitions around, for investment products, these types of investment strategies that are commonly used in sustainable and responsible investing. And an example in terms of ASIC's actions. Here's an example: Active Super. Particular, ASIC's alleging that Active Super had held 28 holdings that either directly or indirectly exposed members to securities that Active Super claimed were being restricted. So the diagrams on the left is being communicated in Active Super's impact report, yet ASIC is alleging that they've had quite a number of holdings that actually span those industry categories. So again, that seems to, well, it's still an action that's currently in play, but you can see where Active Super probably could have benefited from applying some of the guidance that ASIC has provided on its website. In terms of thinking about how we at ERM help organisations, I think the important thing to think about is the cost of mitigating the risk is certainly well below the cost of inaction. In terms of at my travels, when you consider the cost of responding to even regulatory notices, so thinking about the ACCC notices that were issued, even responding to those, estimated to be at least costing companies $1 to $2 million on average when it comes to really being able to respond in a credible way. That excludes the cost of management time lost and the opportunity cost of where management time is spent. So really, so for modest investments, you could be strengthening your control environment. And I just wanted to spend a little bit of time talking about areas where we support our organizations and clients, really starting from the foundations around integrating sustainability across your organization, having an integrated management system, thinking about how your strategy ties in with your governance, ties in with what you report internally and externally, how you integrate and work with core teams like legal, marketing, and finance. Building capability. We help build capability from board right down to management and site level teams. We help clients apply external standards, and the external standards are important to point to frameworks that are credible. So that might be measurement standards, it might be target setting standards, it might be disclosure standards, or generally management approaches on sustainability. So this can range from topics like net zero through to other sustainability targets and topic areas, and really helping you communicate the assumptions and limitations, I think, is important. There are parts of our business also get involved in assurance and verification. That can either be as external opinions on particular data, through principles-based assurance over entire sustainability reports, or through internal audit support, so helping undertake internal audit reviews, help develop internal audit plans, and really enhancing their team bandwidth. We're also upskilling many internal audit teams. Management reviews, undertaking process and control reviews for specific sustainability topics, and or general greenwashing risk management reviews. And then really core level compliance and regulation, and that might be site level compliance and regulation. Our teams helping companies with biodiversity compliance, social and human rights compliance aspects, really honing in on environmental and social impacts at an operational and project level. So a little bit of an overview of what ERM focuses on. I will pass over to Charlie now to take us into the minefield of net zero and carbon neutral claims.
Thank you, Alan. Hi, everyone. So yeah, my name's Charlie Naggs. I lead ERM's decarbonisation.
I think you're just on mute there, Charlie.
Oh dear, am I? You can't hear me? Testing?
No, I can hear you.
You can hear me? Okay.
Yeah.
Alan, it might be your speaker, so I'll press on and hope that everyone else can hear me as well. So yeah, I work in the decarbonisation space. It was based in Melbourne.
Sorry, Charlie, that's not coming through.
Sorry, Alan, I think it might be your speakers rather than...
yeah, we can hear him fine.
Rather than my microphone. Okay. Yeah, based now in Singapore, and with more of an APAC focus. So I'm hoping, I know there's a lot of people from the broader APAC region on the call, so I'm hoping to bring that that perspective on things a little bit today as well. And mostly focusing on greenwashing claims as they relate to net zero and carbon neutral claims. So what I'm going to do is just run through a couple of case studies and then give you a couple of top tips on how to avoid staining your brand through greenwashing. But the first thing I want to say was, across APAC, there are certainly some countries in the region that have taken a really tough stand on greenwashing. So notably Australia and New Zealand, which Alan focused on a lot. And in those countries, we've seen legal actions already commenced and in some cases fines issued. But, across broader APAC, we see countries like Japan, Singapore, India, where governments have flagged concerns about greenwashing, and they've started to put companies on notice and indicate that they're going to be developing guidelines around, what constitutes a reasonable environmental claim. And you can imagine that, potentially legal action or regulatory action will not be too far behind that. But what I want to say is, even if you're in a country where greenwashing is not currently a regulatory issue, based on the current trajectory of things, you might well find that country, in the next few years is, you are looking down the barrel of regulatory frameworks to prevent greenwashing and all that brings. So no matter where you are, the risk of greenwashing exists. It exists through two main channels. So Alan talked a lot about the kind of legal channels. So you could be, because of greenwashing, exposed to legal action. But then, of course, there are also those greenwashing claims that play out in the court of public opinion and in media that can damage a company's brand without ever going to court. So it doesn't matter if you're in a country where greenwashing is not currently a high priority issue. If you fall foul of greenwashing and get hauled through the media for it, it is still a big risk. So just wanted to pick a few examples here of cases, these are the legal cases that involve greenwashing. And of course, there are a plethora of other examples where legal action hasn't been involved. Alan talked about Dieselgate, so I don't need to talk about that one. But just in terms of the sheer number, the financial penalty, direct financial penalty involved in greenwashing, that's it's hard to think of a bigger one than Dieselgate. Another one that was recently flagged in Australia was Mercer superannuation, so very similar to the active super example that Alan gave, where they explicitly said that they weren't going to invest in certain sectors like alcohol and gambling and fossil fuels, and the regulator has alleged that they in fact did invest in those sectors. So there's a case ongoing there. Tolu Energy, we're planning to build a gas-fired power station in Africa that they said would be carbon neutral. And then when people started asking questions, they found that there was no modelling, no work that had been done to actually substantiate that claim. And so they were fined $35,000 as a direct penalty for false and misleading statements. Other examples, the Delta example and the Evian example, are both cases where the terminology carbon neutral has been used. And it's becoming more and more, I guess, problematic, that terminology carbon neutral. In both of those cases, in Delta's case, they said they would be the world's first carbon neutral airline in 2020. In Evian's case, they labeled their water as carbon neutral. But in both cases, plaintiffs have said that there are two kind of key issues there. One of them is just a lack of information about what do you mean by carbon neutral, because it is such a widely used term and everyone seems to use it a little bit differently. So providing information about how do you define carbon neutral in the context of that claim, and also the carbon credits that were being used to make the claim were considered to be of poor integrity, particularly in the Delta case. So a couple of issues going on there. And then in Santos's case, so they have claimed that they have through their disclosures, a credible pathway to being net zero by 2040. They're a gas company, gas exploration and production company. Have said they have a credible pathway to net zero. But again, when they were pressed on that by shareholders, there was not, so the case goes on, but prima facie, there was not enough information to substantiate that claim. And so Santos are now in the courts with the shareholder activist organisation to I guess try to give them confidence that they do actually have a clear and robust pathway to getting to net zero. So just a few examples there of greenwashing cases that involve legal action. And if we go to the next slide, Alan, hopefully you can hear me okay. Thank you. And sorry, you're going to have to cycle through these. They're animated, but I guess I just wanted to provide a couple of top tips. A lot of these align with Alan's from the couple of slides ago. The first one is really to align with credible standards. So there is a high degree of safety in aligning with credible standards, especially if you then obtain independent assurance over your adherence to those standards. But the point that I would make there is that aligning with standards isn't guaranteed to avoid any accusations of greenwashing, which leads into my second top tip, which is that there are a whole heap of different green labels out there for various products and organizations and different dimensions of sustainability, be it climate change or sustainable sourcing or biodiversity or water. And you really need to make sure that you do due diligence over the labels that you use, because if you use a label that is found not to be robust, then obviously that's on you. That sort of greenwashing impact is on you. So then we get into another group of recommendations, which is around communicating clearly. So I'm recommending here that you, further to what I was saying on the previous slide, think carefully before using terms like carbon neutral. Or carbon neutral is the other one that we hear a lot of. I think those terminologies are potentially quite problematic and potentially misleading just because they do get used in such a wide range of ways. And I guess to give that a bit of added weight, the EU has, and Susie might talk about this, has flagged that it is actually going to ban the use of these sorts of what they call sweeping claims, carbon neutral, climate neutral, eco, green. They're going to ban the use of those sweeping claims by 2026. So yeah, really recommend that you think very carefully before using those claims and be very specific about what your claims are. Secondly, provide the foundational information about the claims that you're making. Things like what parts of your business are involved, what boundaries included, what sorts of credits are you using. Those kinds of things are really important for stakeholders. Only buy credits from credible providers. Make sure you do your due diligence. That's a pretty simple one. And then we've got another sort of category of recommendations, which is around just making sure that you can back up your claims. So, number 6 there, really try to focus on what you're doing rather than what you aspire to be. So avoid claims like we will be net zero by 2040, unless you have a really clear pathway to get there, because what regulators and others are finding now is that it's not enough to just make that claim. Even if it is a science-based target or based on a credible standard, it's not enough just to make that claim. You have to demonstrate that you can actually get there, that you have an understanding of how you're going to get there. And then the final one is just about being transparent. So I know, I've kind of urged a bit of restraint over those last recommendations, but we don't want this to suppress the information that people divulge. It's just about being transparent. So, we know that the transition is going to be really challenging. Don't be afraid to talk about those challenges. If your modeling is based on assumptions, as all modeling is, or if you've got gaps in your data, be transparent about those, and it really helps to diminish the risk of greenwashing. I will leave it there, Alan, and get involved in the Q&A towards the end.
Thank you. Apologies for interrupting you when I thought yourself. So, excellent. We'll pass over to Susie Giles now. Thanks, Susie, for joining us early morning, and I'll let you kick off.
Thanks, Alan. Thanks, Charlie. Yeah. So as Alan said, I'm based over in Europe. So I live in The Hague in the Netherlands. So it's early morning for me, but lovely to be here. So just to totally echo what's been said so far, and just to give you the European perspective, it's no different over here. There is a raft of regulations coming through the EU, all as part of the EU Green Deal, and part of that is going to be stricter regulations around the way we talk about green claims. These are some examples here where the Advertising Standards Association, actually in the UK, who quite frequently take action against companies. So, here there are just a few examples which cover Etihad Airways, who basically said that they had sustainable aviation because they stopped the use of single-use plastic, obviously nothing to do with the carbon impact of their flights. So they were told to take that advertising down. And equally, Shell, this is an example of an advertisement from Shell, which is local to a city in the UK, where they talked about renewable electricity being provided from Shell. And essentially the ASA made them take the advertising down because they said it was misleading, considering that the majority of the energy that's provided through Shell is not renewable. In fact, if anything, they're slightly reducing some of that activity. So I think the key thing here, when the ASA look at these advertisements and take these actions against organizations, they do the consumer test, which is, what messages is the consumer going to take away from this piece of marketing? And will they make a purchase based on this? And that in itself is really important, because I think we need to remember the much bigger picture around all of this. The reason why greenwashing is wrong is because if we are going to get to where we need to get to with reducing global warming and reaching net zero, we need to give people the opportunity to make the right buying decisions, whether that be, around a service or a product or the energy they receive. Otherwise, it's a very mixed message market, and it's incredibly difficult to understand what the actual situation is over emissions and what these companies are claiming. So this work is really important. And if you go to the next slide, Alan. So yeah, as Charlie referred to, there is actually the EU are currently going through a proposal on green claims. It's not fully voted on yet, but it's going through EU Parliament and it will be finalised in 2024. But essentially, companies will no longer be able to make, if they want to make voluntary green claims about products, then this directive would basically make sure that they substantiate those green claims. So you need to be able to specify when you make a green claim, is that about the whole product? Is it about part of the product? It needs to be based in scientific evidence. You need to be transparent about where that's come from. And so, you know, this is something which will have an impact on organizations. It's also going to cost money for organizations to be able to make sure that they're reporting these claims correctly, having them verified, and also companies outside of the EU who are selling products within the EU will have to adhere to this as well if they want to make those green claims. I think what experience I would share from the kind of work that I do with clients, I think, you know, I work with organizations who really want to talk about the sustainability and they really want to talk about that aspect of the product and the service, and we help them with that, but we are there to make sure that what they claim, to be able to give themselves a business advantage by talking about their sustainability credentials, that we make sure that is credible. And as Charlie and Alan have said before, the most important thing is to be transparent about where you are on this journey. We don't expect everyone to completely have solved all their issues, but we do expect them to be honest about what stage they are at. And the other thing is, now is the time to make sure that your communications teams and your legal teams and your marketing teams are communicating. Quite often I speak to sustainability colleagues in organizations, and then I speak to communications directors in organizations, and then I'm given content to put in reports which has come from their marketing team, and we have to push back and say, you cannot say this about this product. And they say, but this is in our brochure, which our marketing team produced. So this is really a time for people across organizations to really educate themselves about the issues around greenwashing, because it will land an organization in hot water if that knowledge isn't shared across the organization. So I'll stop there for now, Alan. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, Susie. I'll just stop sharing screen and happy to pass over to Anson. And yeah, great to have Anson from RIA presenting their perspectives.
Thanks, Alan. Okay, hi everyone. So thank Alan for introduction and also ERM for inviting me here. I'm the Senior Responsible Investment Analyst from RIA. To start with, maybe I'll just give a brief introduction of where I'm from and how we are related to managing greenwashing risk. Okay, so RIA stands for Responsible Investment Association of Australasia. We have over 500 members, which are mainly asset managers or owners or financial advisors based in Australia or New Zealand. And you can see here, our mission is to promote and support approaches to different types of responsible investment to align capital to achieve a healthy and sustainable society in terms of environmental and also economy. So it's our business, and certification of financial product is a big part of this mission. We run a third-party verification program for financial products that carry responsible or ESG claims to be true to the label and to have a rigorous investment process to substantiate and to support the claims is a key part of this certification. And obviously, greenwashing is a big obstacle to the mission because it will damage and dampen public and also retail, in particular retail investors' trust in the financial products, and we will also it won't help to like drain capital to a sustainable economy. To share some statistics we had in our internal and also partner research, there's really increasing consumer demand, and people do really want to invest in responsibly and also find ways to support sustainable economy in the financial products. You can see here over 70% of the retail investors in New Zealand and Australia will have concerns if they find they invest in something in greenwashing that or have risk of greenwashing, and they will move to other financial products. And at the same time, a majority of them believe that getting certified or verification from a third-party provider can help them to identify products that can help them make the choice, and they're more likely to invest in those products with a certification. So to go in more details about certification or what third-party verification can do in relation to greenwashing, I'll highlight a few points here. In terms of certification of financial products, in simple words, it means to have a product certified, it means it has met several requirements based on the standard, as Charlie previously said. To align with a credible standard is an important part to gain the trust of the investors. And here, during the certification, it's not just about minimum requirement, but to achieve best practice. Take our certification example. Last year, over 70% of our product got certified. They get some conditions, or they need to make changes to their documentation or marketing to meet the certification standard. And also from a consultation paper from the Treasury of Australian government a few weeks ago, it also mentioned that voluntary certification and standards did help provide a degree of consistent assurance to the general public. And also, when a product gets certified, is also meeting the raising bar and being measured against the standard that continue to evolve. When we talk about certification, financial product certification standard, it's principle based. The principle can come from industry norms and also collaboration with technical input, and also need to take into consideration of precedents and to ensure that there's like a consistency within the certification in the program. And the third point is also, I think what Susie has mentioned about a consumer test. And from certification, what we talk is like getting a consumer lens to look at the product, because aside from regulatory perspective, we also look at words and also documents from a consumer perspective. What does the word or like it means to general public or to a general consumers? And also, as I mentioned here, to be reassured by external party to confirm the product's credential is also important. Certification is not just a tick a box exercise, it can be challenging. And in the coming slide, I will share a bit more about what's the process in certification. For our certification, I would say for us, a good certification program, we are founded 22 years ago, and the certification program has been run for more than 15 years. So there's been a lot of build up in the cooperation with international bodies, and also build up a big pool of precedents to work on. And here you can see global alignment and collaboration is also important. As Enemy previously mentioned earlier this month, GSIA, CFA Institute, and also PRI has given out the definition, make clear definitions or outline definitions of several terms like impact investing and screening. And they also highlight that to have consistent and precise use of terminology globally can help avoid greenwashing. So in our program, we also need to like take into global standard and also the changing landscape very quickly into consideration. And another aspect is to align and communicate with the regulator, to the regulators, in particular to be like really pay good attention to the greenwashing guidance and also what the latest regulatory changes are. To hide this time we would like to highlight how certification, what are certification steps, the procedures will be, and being transparent and also an independent, credible verification will be very important. In real certification case, if a financial product decide to go through certification, they need to fill in about 140 questions and also provide some documentations for verification. And assessment will be against a clearly standard, which is like public and transparent to them. And the certification assessment team will assess the product based on a clearly articulated standard with the support of external third-party tools and also database. This assessment process in this two-way dialogue, it's not just about like ticking box or like answer questions. The product provider can also like raise questions to seek clarification, and also in some case, it will also push for internal changes. For example, to let the internal marketing team know what the latest like risk or like as you mentioned, like the education needed internally. And then we will get an independent certification assessment panel, which is formed by experts and also experts within the industry, and they are not and they're independent of certification team. So we need to make sure that there's an independent process there. And after the assessment panel review, it can become to like a strict certification, or as we mentioned, it can be some conditions or recommendations to make the changes. It can be changes to marketing materials or even the underlying process. And again here, greenwashing is a big topic, and it's something important to look into verification. And finally, we also have a portion of the products will go for independent verification panel. And now we are glad to have our valuable partner ERM and also Point Advisory, Westline Consulting on that verification panel. To finish, here I can provide a few common issues or examples we see during our assessment, and it's also related to what like Alan Susil previously had mentioned. The first common problem we usually see is about interpretations of some commonly used term. Let's take fossil fuels example. If you look at from a dictionary, okay, that's from an online dictionary, fuels such as coal, oil, natural gas formed in earth from plant or animal remains. So that's dictionary definition. So if we look at some financial product providers disclosure, when they talk about like negative screen, or when they talk about their way to net zero, to achieve net zero or like carbon neutral, sometimes when they talk about exclusion of fossil fuels, but end up you'll find it's just like a particular kind of fossil fuels. And in some case, they may not really clearly talk about which part of the value chain they will be they will have a negative screen on. So here, a very precise and detailed definitions and also detailed explanation is required when we talk about like some common terms. Unless because when you look at from a consumer perspective, sometimes a term can mean different things to different people. And the second thing is about the use of certain labels or substantiation statements. Here, I get the examples directly from the asset information sheet 271. And the first example is about if a product claim is like no gambling fund, but end up it only it still allow products with like more than 30% of the revenue from gambling activities. Obviously, is a not true to label. And even if they include the substantiation statement in the disclosure, it won't help because it's definitely contradictory to the no meaning in the label. And the second and third example is about a product label with certain character like stewardship or social investing. And that's something, but end up it's not really what they do in the process. In that case, they really need to provide examples and also a clear process about what they mean by those labels and what process they really how they're really tackling or doing that. So to conclude, greenwashing in financial service perspective means that it can be mean like misrepresentation of financial product that have a greater social or mental credentials that it actually possesses, in many cases, it may not be intentional, and it can be avoided by having a third party verify with assessment against a very transparent and well-informed standard. So with this, I pass back to Alan.
Great. Thank you, Anson. Thank you. And I know, again, the depth of your program has been built over many years, and yeah, it's very highly regarded and unique across the responsible investment community globally. So well done. And I know we could have a whole hour session just on your program. So thank you for the summary. We'll move to Q&A now. And while I'm just pulling up this slide, we also have an anonymous poll that you can answer. That might be useful for us just to get a bit of an understanding of what people have experienced when it comes to greenwashing risk within their own organisation. So feel free to populate that and start to pop in your questions on Q&A, or feel free to raise your hand and we can get your question verbally. While people are responding to those polling questions, we can jump to Simon Yao's got a question. I think that's probably for Charlie. How do you define or measure, in quotation marks, a clear and credible pathway to get to net zero by a particular year?
Yeah, so I mean, I think there's a few elements to it. There's a robust baseline carbon inventory, and that's where you can align with things like the GHG protocol and make sure that you include all relevant emission sources within your baseline inventory. Second thing is you need to understand the endpoint, the net zero endpoint, but also the trajectory to net zero, and that's where the Science-Based Targets Initiative standards come into play. They guide you on what a 1.5 degree trajectory looks like. So aligning with SBTI in terms of target setting, you need to know what your abatement gap is, right? So that's the gap between your business as usual emissions, future emissions, and your target trajectory. So you need to do a bit of modeling to work out, if our business just keeps doing what it's doing, then what are our emissions going to be versus what are our emissions need to be for us to be on that net zero trajectory. And then you need to have a really a suite of clear actions, energy efficiency, renewables, transport fleet upgrades, industrial process changes, these kinds of things to bridge that gap, that abatement gap, so that you can show your stakeholders that we know where we need to get to, we know what the gap is, and we have a set of opportunities that we know enable us to bridge that gap. And then the final point I'd make there is you also, as part of a credible plan, need to make sure that you use offsets judiciously, and that usually means minimizing the use of offsets. And the Science-Based Targets Initiative provides guidance on the extent to which offsets can be used to achieve SBTs.
Thank you, Charlie. Thank you. We've got another question from Harsha. This would probably be best for you, Anson. So how about CN certification as per the PAS 2060 standard? Would that standard meet the requirement? I presume that might mean the requirement of the RIA certification. I'll pass over to you.
From our certification perspective, because our certification will be based on our standard and also the guidance of which are like public and transparent. So it may not be how to say, like equivalent. It will still go through independent verification based on the standard we set out. Of course, information and also credentials from and other third-party materials of like party will be the important part of it. Can be strong evidence of meeting our standards. And another thing is to get certification for RIA, we also need to consider eligibility as we take into local regulations into consideration. And our certification is valid in the Australia and for New Zealand-based products. So I believe that certification, we do have certification program in other parts of the world on financial products, but I think in each region present, we still need to have some like local relevance. I think that will be a short answer to the question.
And I can probably just supplement that a little bit. So PAS 2050 is a carbon neutral standard. It is a publicly available standard. I guess, Harsha, you guys need to assess whether you think that that's a credible standard. Personally, I think if it's applied properly, it is a credible standard. But again, I would just echo the comments that I made specifically around the use of the terminology carbon neutral. I think you can get away with it today. You can probably get away with it, next year, but it's on the way out, and we need to start thinking of different types of terminology to use there. I wouldn't be at all surprised to see PAS 2060 change to reflect that. And just as a final anecdote, the equivalent standard in Australia is called the Climate Active Standard. It's a carbon neutral, government endorsed carbon neutral standard, and they are currently having a consultation where they've very clearly indicated that it will no longer be in 6-12 months time, it will no longer be a carbon neutral certification standard. It will be something else. They are dropping language, or they're seeking to drop the language around carbon neutral, subject to some stakeholder engagement that's going on at the moment.
Thank you, Charlie, for the addition. And also to add one more point, because for our Switch program, climate will be something we can assess if that's what the product claim. But besides, the assessment will also be on other claims that the product make, including some social or other environmental objectives they claim to achieve.
Thank you, Anson. Thank you, Charlie. That's great. And unless there's any other questions, it'd be useful just to see that poll. It looks like there was a mixture of responses there in terms of our two questions. One was around the kind of incidents around greenwashing, but also in terms of, is greenwashing risk being actively managed in your organisation? So good to see that at least partially, in the majority of organisations are looking to actively manage the risk, and thankfully not that many have received notices in this audience. For me, I guess a closing question for each of our speakers. Thank you for your perspectives and thoughts. I guess what would you suggest would be the top action that our companies can take away to reduce greenwashing risk in their organisation? Might start with you, Susie.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, I mean, I think, as I said earlier, it's really important that there is knowledge shared across organisations, and that there are channels to make sure that any kind of communication which is put out there about green credentials or about the sustainability of an organisation, that there is some way that those teams can verify and check what they're saying. When we look at greenwashing for organisations, we recommend doing an audit of everything that they have, from the annual report, sustainability report, their website, their social media. If you've got a global organisation who has, sites in different countries, the same scrutiny isn't always, there. So it's really, really important to connect with your communications, your legal team, and your marketing teams.
Thanks, Susie. Charlie?
The one that I would go back to from my list earlier is probably, don't talk about aspirations, talk about actions. So if you stick to things that you have done or are planning to do, really concrete, defined things, not vague, sweeping statements, rather than what you're intending to do or where you're going to get to, then I think you're on much safer ground.
Yeah.
Great, thank you. And Anson, top suggested action.
Yeah, I think I will more like echo Susie's point as greenwashing sometimes can be unintentional. It can be like something come from miscommunication, maybe with marketing team. So sharing the information, and in particular, like maybe information from a third-party verification, can help to push for changes in internal in an organization internally. And also, I think another advice is to act quickly once you find something that's like material, because we do see the regulators can take actions very quickly.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Anson. And so very much echoing all of your points. And my last suggestion would be, I guess, really collaborating across the organisation, the important role that the sustainability or responsible investment team has in connecting with support teams like finance, risk, and legal teams, and then reaching out to various teams across the organisation. So starting from product development through to marketing, your finance teams when it comes to disclosures, and just really working across the whole business and connecting in with each of the relevant experts across the team. Thank you so much for our speakers. Thank you, Susie, for early morning participation. Thanks, Charlie, for joining from Singapore. And Anson, thank you so much for joining from RIA. Really appreciate the participation, the attendance for those of us that have joined us today. Hopefully we've answered some questions. Hopefully we've shared some information that will be of use to you as you manage greenwashing risk in your own organisations. Thanks for attending and have a great afternoon.
Thank you.
Thanks, Alan.